Which do you choose?
Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. That's the big question in Star Wars right now, isn't it? Which path will Grogu choose? The way of the Jedi or the Mandalorian? But I think the answer to that question runs a lot deeper and exposes the early flaws in Luke's Jedi Order that brought it to destruction. A little later in the video, I'm going to be joined by two Star Wars academics, Shaylo Wren and Adam Lance Garcia. Say hi, everyone.
Hi!
So, regarding this choice, it's not that easy to predict. After all, Grogu already chose to go with Luke once. He understands the value of being around other Jedi because he grew up in the Jedi Temple. On some level, he feels a connection to the Force, and he knows that Luke and Ahsoka share that connection. He's like Mowgli at the end of the Jungle Book, being drawn toward the Man Village. And Luke made a good point about him making attachments.
Because, Grogu, a short time for you is a lifetime for someone else.
Din will be an old man when Grogu hits puberty, so his species would value life and death very differently than most of the galaxy. This is one reason why Yoda was so keen for Anakin to embrace detachment.
Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force.
Now remember that line because we're going to revisit it later. But on the other hand, there are lots of practical storytelling reasons for Grogu to return to Din. It's not much of a show if he chooses to stay with the Jedi. Plus, it would mean that, well, he may not have made it through the destruction of 2 Jedi Temples. In fact, I'm starting to wonder if the title of the show, The Mandalorian, is referring to Grogu and not Din Djarin. We could be witnessing the origin story of a Mandalorian Jedi King, the second coming of Tar Vizsla. But mostly, I want to revisit the reason Luke is giving this choice. Both Luke and Ahsoka think that Grogu's attachment to Din is a hindrance.
If he sees you, it will only make things more difficult for him.
However, you will be giving into attachment to those that you love, and forsaking the way of the Jedi.
This is because the Jedi Code forbade emotional attachments to people, or, as Anakin says it,
attachment is forbidden. Possession is forbidden. Compassion, which I would define as unconditional love, is central to a Jedi's life. So you might say that we are encouraged to love.
But the High Republic novels, which are great by the way, have introduced a new aspect to this, which I'm going to let Adam speak more about later. Basically, not all Jedi have always had such rigid rules for detachment. Now those Clone Wars era Jedi did have a good reason for their code of detachment. The Jedi are meant to value all life equally, and to use the Force for the benefit of all. If a Jedi loved another person too much, then they would be afraid of losing them.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Then, as we saw with Anakin, they would use the Force for their own personal ends. This is a path to the dark side. But the problem is, we've seen that this dogmatic line does not always work, or at least it only works if you raise children from infancy so they will always believe it. People can't so easily turn off their emotions. In fact, it was Luke's love for his father and his sister that made him believe his father could be turned.
I feel the good in you.
And it was Vader's love for Padme that caused him to turn on the Emperor and save her son. You would think that this would have made Luke more open to embracing a new way, because the first person he trains is his sister, but then she quits, essentially because she realizes that it's what's best for her future son.
Leia told me that she had sensed the death of her son at the end of her Jedi path.
Now Luke has embraced a more old-fashioned approach. We shouldn't be surprised. He was taught by a practically immortal god wizard and a Jedi of the Clone Wars era. Ahsoka also came up during the Clone Wars, so she believes in this detachment approach. After all, attachment did cause her master to fall to the dark side.
Ahsoka.
Anakin.
So everyone who's guiding Luke is from this era, and above all, Luke wants to avoid his father's mistakes. He wants his students to remain detached so they won't fall to the dark side. And we see this already with his training of Grogu. For instance, Grogu wants to use the Force to eat a frog. He's using his power for his own ends. This is the kind of behavior that can lead to the dark side. We've also seen him use the Force choke to protect Din, a person that he loves. So we see that when he uses the Force instinctually, it produces very dark side-like behavior. Luke ends up levitating all the frogs to teach Grogu a lesson. Grogu could use the Force to get all the frogs he wants, but he should be looking for a deeper purpose. The Force is for more than finding food. This is the kind of reverse lesson from Yoda raising the X-Wing in Empire Strikes Back. Yoda did this to show Luke that the Force was strong enough to physically lift a big object, but also to show Luke that the attachment to the X-Wing was meaningless.
You must feel the Force around you, even between the land and the ship.
It could have always been brought out of the water with no problem, and Luke instead needed to focus on the present. And Luke is teaching that same lesson to Grogu. You can eat whenever you want, but focus on the here and now.
Never his mind on where he was. what he was doing.
The choice that Luke offers Grogu is very much the choice that Yoda gave him.
If you leave now, help them you could, but you will destroy all for which they have fought and suffered.
And it turned out that Luke didn't actually need to go because he accomplished nothing. Now, present-day Luke Skywalker must look back at that decision with regret, but everything turned out fine. If anything, embracing his passions made him more compassionate. I mean, compassion literally means to share suffering. By being compassionate, he was able to share Vader's suffering, empathize with him, and turn him. But this brings us back to Luke's main failure, Ben Solo. Right away, Ben's training was going to be different because Luke was his uncle. Luke would have felt a stronger bond with him through Leia, and Ben would have kept his ties to his mother and father. So he was not taken away as a child and trained in the old ways of the Jedi. Yet, we see Luke trying to enforce this old Jedi code on Grogu. Now, if he forced Ben to suppress his own attachments, then this would have been the emotional wedge that Palpatine could have exploited, the way for him to enter Ben's mind and manipulate his emotions.
I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head.
Okay, but to answer all of these questions, I have two fantastic guests with me. I have Adam Lance Garcia. How you doing today, Adam?
I am doing so fine. I'm happy to be here, sir.
That's great. And we also have Shaylo Wren. Say hi, Shaylo.
Hi.
Okay, before we get into answering all those questions, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode. My thoughts are well documented in our Easter egg video. I loved it, but I want to hear from you.
I feel like there was a lot of emotional payoff and a lot of joy as Star Wars fans that came from that video or that episode. I do almost wish it could have been content in The Mandalorian Season 3 because I feel like it could have had more room to breathe. Like, it's such amazing moments that, like, I wanted it to have more time. Like, that's, like, I loved it so much I wanted more. But overall, I was very happy with it, though.
I also really loved it, but I also have a lot of really mixed feelings about it. I think that it has everything that I've really wanted to see, the building of Luke's Jedi Temple, him training post Return of the Jedi, because like you, Ryan, I grew up reading the expanded universe. Like, seeing Luke post Return of the Jedi is kind of where I became a fan. But then seeing Cobb Vanth versus Cad Bane, all these little elements, like these things I was really excited to see. Seeing Luke and Ahsoka talk is insane. That being said, I'm not exactly clear why it's in this series. Why is it in the Book of Boba Fett? Overall, I've enjoyed the Book of Boba Fett. I kind of like that it's taking these wild swings, but I've never seen a show structured like this, where you have 4 episodes that move in and out, backwards and forwards in time, exploring this one character's life, and then for 2 episodes out of 7, the last 2 episodes out of 7, completely lose sight of that main character. While the Mandalorian episode does a lot of really interesting stuff in terms of tying in thematically, this episode, kind of felt like another show. If you had told me these last 2 episodes were the season premiere of Mandalorian Season 3, I would believe you. Why do it now? Why do it right before you finish your season? There's a lot of Again, I really liked it. I loved it. Also, why?
That's such a Star Wars fan sentence. I really liked it.
Yes.
It's everything I ever wanted.
But
Through the Force, you will find balance as well.
I was able to turn off my brain and just emotionally invest in Star Wars. Even knowing that Ahsoka would have had a conversation with Luke and going, that's your dad's droid, right? She would recognize R2-D2 and be like, oh my gosh, the Force moves in mysterious ways. That's your father's droid.
Yeah.
What was my mom? I have no memory of my mother. What was she like? And she, let me tell you everything about your mother. Let me tell you all these stories about the Clone Wars. Let me tell you about Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan was in love with a woman. I know we'll never get to see all that stuff on screen, but just knowing that it's happened. In our Easter egg video, I said it was a fanfic moment. Totally is. Don't care. Absolutely loved, just seeing them on screen together.
So much like your father.
First of all, do you think Luke is wrong to pursue this dogma of detachment? Adam, do you want to go first?
Sure. 100%. I think he is totally wrong. I'm also kind of curious as to why Ahsoka wasn't saying to him, maybe revise. think a little differently. It is interesting. I mean, considering we know that like this all will lead into the fall of his Jedi Order, like between the sequel trilogies and like the rise of Ben Solo and the First Order, it is interesting to see like these mistakes being made so early on. But I mean, also it kind of tracks. He doesn't have that much training at this point. He has whatever he's kind of gleaned and learned. We've kind of seen a little bit off screen. We've seen in like Star Wars Battlefront 2, a little bit here and there in the books. And he's only had a couple of days training with Yoda, maybe a month, and maybe however long that time on the Falcon was. And so he's very much a novice. He's not really prepared for this. I think that's the biggest thing. He's not prepared to be a teacher.
Your point about Ahsoka is interesting because I originally thought the same thing, but I thought, well, no, she saw Anakin fall from attachment. So I don't know necessarily she would have encouraged him to go another way. Shayla, what do you think? Was Luke wrong to pursue this path?
Yeah, I definitely think... I don't want to say that attachments are perfectly 100% okay because... like, obviously they can lead to problems, but to say that you can't have any attachments whatsoever feels very wrong because it's just like psychology. Like, if you don't learn how to healthily deal with these things, they can rule over you and they can become issues and they can be windows for you to be manipulated through, just like Anakin when he didn't know how to handle his emotions healthily. So to cut them off entirely only will cause problems.
What other way is there at this point? So, when we look at Jedi, like there's this long history of the Jedi. A lot of it's not canon anymore, Knights of the Old Republic, things like that. But, what I explained earlier holds up. Like, there are very good reasons to avoid detachment. Detachment keeps you focused on the Force. It keeps you from valuing one life over another. And again, if you look at Yoda, who has watched countless centuries worth of people die, of humanoids die, it's easier for him to take this lofty view. So what other possible path of connection is there? Is this something we have to go pull from extended universe novels? What other way should Luke be pursuing here?
Oh, sure. I mean, you look at the High Republic, you have Bel Zadafar with his Charhound Ember, and it is a pet. He has a pet, and there's an attachment there and a caring there. There's sort of this gray line between, being able to attach yourself, like Avar Kriss and Elzar Mann definitely have an attachment. Those kids should just run away and get married.
Back up for just a second.
Yes.
Not everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody's read these novels.
I apologize.
I've read a couple of them. I really like them. I'm into it. But slow down and
so
back up and tell us about Avar Kriss.
So Avar Kriss is one of the sort of Jedi Masters who's overseeing Starlight Beacon, and Elzar Mann is another Jedi. I think he's a master at this point, who they basically established within the canon that they clearly had an intimate relationship to some degree. Whether it's kind of implied that growing up there was Elzar Mann and Stellan Gios, they were basically three friends, and Elzar Mann and Avar Kriss had a relationship, and Elzar Mann kind of wanted it to go a little bit beyond just the intimacy, and she clearly had some love and affection for him, but they kind of kept it away because of this idea of attachment. So there's this idea that you can have relationships, you can have sex in the Jedi Order, you can have pets in the Jedi Order, you can have a kind of attachment. And one can argue that the High Republic is going to show why the Jedi made this choice to go full on with no attachments whatsoever. But I think this idea of Luke giving a hard and fast choice is just a mistake. I think it's not understanding that there are nuances to the galaxy.
So to that point about Jedi having relationships or feeling affection for people, you have Obi-Wan Kenobi and Duchess Satine. And it's established that they almost had a romantic relationship, or maybe they did. And at one point, Obi-Wan even tells her,
"Had you said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order."
So clearly there was something there where he was almost tempted away from the priesthood, so to speak. But he is there and he is heartbroken when she dies. So it isn't like he may have bottled up those feelings or placed them in their proper context, but they were still there. I mean, the Jedi aren't robots. They still feel compassion for other beings. But there's one very big difference here in in the, immediately with his Jedi experience. That is that his first pupil was his sister. And obviously in teaching her, he's going to teach her just the basics of what he knows, but he's going to feel a stronger bond with her. And that bond is then passed on to her son, his nephew, Ben. So immediately, Ben's training was, from the perspective of the old Jedi Order, it was tainted. So right away, you have Luke trying, without even realizing it maybe, he's trying to find some balance between the old dogmatic Jedi way and hanging out with his nephew. So where is this line drawn? Like, what else could he have done with this order? What's the alternative, I guess I'm saying? What's the alternative to feeling familial attachments? Shayla, do you have any thoughts?
What I think of is, it goes back to not cutting it off entirely, because when you try to cut off entirely, that's what gave Snoke the window in to manipulate Ben, because he was being pushed away. And it makes me think of going back to the High Republic. In one of the novels, there's a moment where somebody taps into the dark side because of their attachments, and then he stops, and he, instead of pulling away more or seeking help other places, he goes to the Jedi and is like his master, and he's like, I'm struggling. And then they, instead of chastising him or whatever, they're like, okay, it's okay, we're gonna work through this. So that way you're able to bring them in and help them. That's why you can't say no attachments, but learn how to deal with them in a healthy way and roll over them instead of them rolling over you.
The Jedi during the time of the High Republic, it's yeah, you're struggling, come in, let's talk. It's very positive. There's a lot of really great things about the High Republic, and not just the story, but the context of the Jedi Order and how different it was to what we understand. There's this idea of, to Shayla's point, hey, you dealt with the dark side, that's okay. It happens to all of us a little bit once in a while. Let's talk about it. Let's work through it.
It's part of the Force.
It's part of the Force. And again, I think that the biggest thing is with Luke's Jedi, and I think we're going to see sort of an evolution. So we're seeing him give this choice to Grogu at the end of this episode. Then I'm guessing Grogu makes a choice. I'm guessing that choice is the Mandalorian. And that's going to help when he starts taking over Ben's training, find that middle ground, because it's I gave him a choice and he chose going away. If I can't rebuild, I have to rebuild this order somehow. What if I sort of find that middle ground? I think that a lot of this the mistakes and choices that Luke and Grogu make during this period of time are going to inform some of the honestly the mistakes and choices Luke is going to make in the future.
When you talk about the Jedi, right, and the construction of a kind of Jedi order that would allow for attachments or would allow for families, Jedi to have families, things like that, how would they actually have, say, instructed Ben Solo and to deal with his emotions? If you think back to Anakin, for example, okay, you have Anakin, he's secretly married. Let's just pretend that the Jedi had a clause that allowed for this, where they could have told him, oh, okay, you can be married, but, your first duty still, you have to, there's still going to be that I have to save their life if they're in danger, that I need more power to help them.
Yeah, because my brain's still going to High Republic, where this idea of attachments are okay, but understand that everything's of the Force. So if you're attached to one, you're attached to all. There's this idea that it's okay to feel passion, and it's okay to feel a love, but understand that you have to put the greater good first. That's why you're a Jedi. I think that's if there's that middle ground, or the thing that Luke could find a way of yes, you can have a family, yes, you can sort of move on. It's yes, your family is important, yes, that matters, but don't lose sight of the greater good. Don't lose sight of the rest of the galaxy.
There is a line that we cut to earlier that Yoda tells Anakin.
Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them do not. Miss them do not.
And maybe that's it. Maybe it's just Yoda felt love and compassion for every single one of those humanoids he watched die, and it was painful every time. But in the end, because the Force is my ally and a powerful ally it is, it's sort of if you're a born-again Christian, when your family members die, you're really sad, but you believe you're going to meet them in heaven. So maybe that's just the outlook that he could have shared with Ben or Grogu, been look, you're going to lose people, and that's going to suck, but it's okay because there's a greater truth out there.
In the High Republic, they also talk about how, like, passion and love for things is necessary because it keeps you from complacency. So I almost feel like if there's a way that your love for others can motivate you to fight for the Force and for the good, then that would be a healthy way to have those attachments without letting them sidetrack you.
And you've both sort of touched upon it. This idea that the Jedi sort of see everyone as one in the Force. So it's like you love everyone unconditionally because and if you lose someone, you know that they, like, and because in this reality, like, you lose someone, you know basically for a fact that they are going to become one with the Force because you can feel the Force around you. So there's teaching Ben. He could have taught Ben to think like that. Like, yes, feel love for your father, your mother, for me, and know that they are part of the Force if you were to lose them. That's something that my father never understood, is that, yes, it would hurt to lose Padme, but he put Padme before everyone else, before the galaxy, and look what it cost him. And then to that,
that's great.
To Shayla's point, use that passion, use that love to help you help others, to never become complacent.
I mean, he does tell Grogu that, like, basically everyone you know is going to die in front of you. So it is important that he learn now to take a larger view of life and a larger view of the Force. Because, I mean, look, if Grogu goes to the dark side, that's going to be bad. This, like, 900-year-old Force-using Mandalorian warrior with no regard for life because his favorite bestie Din Djarin died hundreds of years ago. So maybe Luke is taking the long view when he gives him that advice.
If you choose the armor, you'll return to your friend, the Mandalorian. However, you will be giving into attachment to those that you love, and forsaking the way of the Jedi. But if you choose the lightsaber, you will be the first student in my academy, and I will train you to be a great Jedi.
We're left with this cliffhanger. Which one is Grogu going to choose? He's like Lone Wolf and Cub. He's the baby with the ball and the sword in front of him. He's got to make a choice. Obviously, as somebody who, like, narratively, I can look at, like, Lucasfilm and go, well, obviously he's going to choose the Mandalorian so he can continue to be in the show The Mandalorian. But if you remove yourself from, like, that logical train of thought, this is, a 50-year-old being who, for the first 30 years of his life, we'll presume, or maybe even 20 years, was trained around Jedi. And when Luke showed up, he didn't hesitate. He knew that's where he was supposed to go. He felt a connection with Ahsoka and Luke that he doesn't share with Din Djarin. So I don't know that, like, it is cut and dry that he will choose that when you remove the narrative component from it and what we all think is going to happen. And, if I want to know what you guys think he'll choose, and if he does stay, is he dead in 30 years?
Oh, no.
Shayla, what do you think? What's Grogu, the lady or the tiger? What's he doing?
Well, my opinion, and again, I'm just basing this off of not the fact that there's a perfect little compartment on the back of his new ship for Grogu, but, like, if we're looking narratively, like, it just Grogu and Din, I feel like Grogu and Din are so similar in, like, their traumas and their background. They both came from, like, Grogu came from the Jedi in Order 66, and then Din came from his family being killed and then brought in as a foundling. I feel like they just understand each other so perfectly that bond is not going to be broken easily, and it's so strong that Grogu is going to go with Din for sure.
I hadn't thought about that, about them having similar pasts and backstories, and obviously Grogu doesn't know all of that about Din Djarin unless he read his mind. But on a Force level, an empathic level, he would probably sense that they're not a dyad, but they could be soulmates.
Yeah.
If you want to look at it
just
that way.
their emotional attachment to one another and how they can understand each other. And
I was gonna say I'm 100% on board with Shayla's selling here. I really like that idea because I didn't even think about it because you have that flashback to the Clone Wars and you're seeing. Like the clone trooper, excuse me, not the Clone Wars. You see that flashback to the Revenge of the Sith where they're fighting off the clones coming to take Grogu. It's very similar to the Clone Wars flashbacks with Din Djarin. So I think it makes sense both in terms of the narrative of Grogu that he's going to choose to stay with Din because that relationship I think, is more profound than his relationship with the Jedi, and Grogu is realizing that. And to the more like larger Lucasfilm of it all, they have that out at the end. We kind of established that Leia and Ben are basically are essentially Luke's first students, and he says, like, if you take this, you'll be my first student. So we know, at least from a metatextual transmedia storytelling, that Grogu is going to choose to stay with Din Djarin.
I'll see you again. I promise.
Well, thank you both for coming on and talking to me about the Book of Boba Fett. Adam Lance Garcia, where can the people find you?
Well, you can find me basically at anything that says Adam Lance Garcia on Twitter, on Instagram, even TikTok at Adam Lance Garcia. And you can listen to my audio drama, The Green Llama. That's Green Llama with one L. The finale premieres next week, February 11th. It's an hour long, and it's presented in Dolby Atmos, and it is 110% inspired by Star Wars. So if you like superheroes and you like Star Wars, Green Llama.
Plug that audio drama. And Shaylo, where can the people find you?
You can find me at TikTok and Twitch mostly as Shaylo_Ren, and I talk about all things nerd and pop culture related.
But let me know your thoughts on the episode and what choice you think Grogu will make down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and be sure to hit that bell. For Screen Crush, I am Ryan Airy.